Now for our roundtable with the one and only News Channel 5 political analyst Brian Crowley, and a happy early Thanksgiving to you, my friend, you and your family. Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, the trio of states that can make or break a candidate, and often do. I read an interesting thing that it's really South Carolina where in the GOP lane, since 1980, only one time did the winner not emerge, the ultimate winner of the GOP race, not emerge as the same person who won South Carolina. So it's all interesting. You've been to all three places over the years. I was in sunny New Hampshire, although it looked like snow in 2016. But
it always looks like snow in New Hampshire.
Few people with more expertise than you. Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump. One, the clear frontrunner. Ron DeSantis trying to hold on to being the alternative to Trump. Nikki Haley from South Carolina fighting him. Put the political calculus together for us. Roll out those three states for us as a man who's been on the ground many times as a political writer for the Palm Beach Post over the years. What are we going to see? What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, it's always local, local, local. And like one of the topics that Nikki Haley is trying to use against Ron DeSantis in Iowa is ethanol. When he was a congressman in 2018, he made a very, very strong condemnation of ethanol in Florida. And he wanted to ban ethanol. Now, he didn't say he wanted to ban it nationwide, but by golly, there wasn't going to be any ethanol in Florida. Well, Nikki Haley and her team have turned that into his ban for ethanol. The most important state for providing ethanol in this country is Iowa. And it means a lot of money to Iowa farmers. So those are the kinds of local things that we don't think about a lot in Florida or in some of the other states, obviously. But those are the kinds of things that come back to haunt you. Be careful what you say 5, 6 years ago, because it can circle back around. You know, he's running into a lot of headwinds with his signing of the 6-week abortion ban.
Not law yet. He signed it, but because of court challenges, it's not law. It's still a 15-week ban in Florida.
On Friday, the U.S. Supreme Court pushed back on the ban on drag queens performances in Florida. He doesn't do well in the courts on some of the things that he pushes. Disney is pushing back even harder on Ron DeSantis these days, and you're starting to see some big contributors who are originally in Ron DeSantis' camp now looking rather favorably at Nikki Haley. So that doesn't mean Ron DeSantis won't do well in Iowa and New Hampshire, but you know, we're 2 months away, and New Hampshire announced their date of January 23rd. Iowa's January 15th.
Right. February 24th for South Carolina, for GOP.
So there's not much time left, and they're going to have to, Ron DeSantis is going to have to work hard to make sure that he can at least be viable when he gets to South Carolina, which ironically is the home state of Nikki Haley.
But is having a political pulse for either of them means simply hoping that you're a number two, and that if Donald Trump stumbles, that you're there? Because at least right now, it's hard to see how that happens.
Well, as you know, I've dubbed them the just-in-case candidates, because they're all hoping that Donald Trump will somehow trip and fall and they can overcome him. I still think the original premise of Ron DeSantis and some of the others, that voters would eventually, Republican voters would eventually start to get weary of Donald Trump, may actually start to happen after the first of the year. We'll see. But yeah, for right now, it still looks like a very, very tough haul for Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley.
I've been reading a lot of late, not necessarily just of late, but that it's always easy to look back, but that Ron DeSantis was all in on trying to peel off Trump supporters and doing it from the right of Trump. At least his critics argue that he tried to do that and really didn't give himself any lane to say, I'm not going to peel off the most ardent supporters of the former president. Maybe I need to modify some of my message and try and pick off those more in the middle of that Republican lane. What are your thoughts as somebody who's been on that scene for so long, Brian?
You know, I think he wasted the last 3 or 4 months in not taking on Donald Trump more directly. To say, I'm Donald Trump on all of the issues, well, they don't need you if you're Donald Trump. They'll take Donald Trump. So you have to give them reasons not to support Donald Trump. He started that in the last, 3 or 4 weeks, talking more and more about how he can't win the general. That's not necessarily a convincing argument. You have to give them other reasons why it's not a good idea to elect Donald Trump. And frankly, showing the kind of courage that said we don't elect people president who are facing indictments, we don't elect people president who didn't properly intervene in the middle of the January 6th insurrection, who didn't even go out of his way to protect his own vice president. But he and the other candidates haven't had the courage to do that because they're afraid of alienating Trump voters. Well, maybe some Trump voters actually appreciate the honesty.
Moving ahead, Brian, the political year like none other. We talk about it again and again, but when I talk to somebody who's had your expertise in covering politics, and you candidly in conversations where we're just talking or on air say, I don't know what the script could be, and any political writer or beat reporter who says they do is kidding you, because there's no script for what's about to roll out in 24.
No, there's nothing like this in the history of the country that we can point to and say, oh, we've been there before. Nothing. And this adds to it the fact that we have a war in Ukraine, a horrible, horrible situation in Israel and in the Gaza Strip. It's horrible in Ukraine too. And we don't know how all of that's going to play out in the weeks and months ahead, whether or not it gets worse or hopefully better. And you know, we don't know what the economy is going to be like 12 months from now when the general election comes. There's so many factors. We don't know where Donald Trump's going to be with the various indictments that he faces. It's such an unpaved road in our politics. And we also have a level of animosity among voters. Forget the candidates, among voters that is just unexplainable to some degree. And it's not helped by the kind of episode we had last week where you have a sitting U.S. senator ready to get into a brawl with a union leader who the two of them sounded like a couple of kids in a cheap bar.
Yeah. Ugly.
Yeah, and you know, you had Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker, elbowing a colleague that he's mad at in the hallway. And you know, this guy, I mean, they act like they're in high school. Stop. Be the leaders that you're supposed to be.
In our remaining time, what else is top of mind for you, my friend? By the way, political junkie is this guy. Right up till airtime, you can't see it, of course, the latest. He's like his own political wire. But what else is top of mind for you, my friend, as we head into Thanksgiving?
Well, I wish that, I think Florida needs a law that says that if you want to run for president and you're the governor, you need to resign. And I don't mean that as a negative toward Ron DeSantis. Running for president is a full-time job. Meanwhile, we don't have a governor who's full-time in Florida. So we have a huge home insurance crisis.
Affordability crisis, insurance crisis.
You know, someone we both know posted something the other day on Facebook about how her 1,700 square foot home, her homeowner's insurance is nearly doubled. It's gone up thousands of dollars, and she's like, oh my God. Many people who respond to that said the same thing's happening to me. Auto insurance is going through the roof. Very little has been done effectively to control that, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of homeowners in Florida are really feeling the suffering, and some people are talking about moving out of state because they can't afford the homeowner's insurance. You know, Medicaid. We have, as the senator pointed out, we have 200,000 plus people who are children who have lost their Medicaid benefits. Meaning that they're suffering. And if we really care about children, if we're worried about children going to drag queen shows, maybe we should worry about their daily health. And the legislature and the governor are not taking action on that. We need a full-time governor.
Brian, as always, I appreciate the insight and analysis, as I know our audience certainly does over these many, many years. And he and I will be buckling up 2024 around the corner. We'll be back with more in just a moment.